My name is Joel Stepanek, and this is going to come as a surprise to you, but when I was younger, I thought church was boring. I remember sitting in my vacation Bible school classes with the, textbooks they give you, and Jesus is always smiling. He's got this perfectly bleached white robe. The disciples are following behind him, maybe like with some tambourines or a little drum, and everyone looks so happy and so excited and so tame. To an 8-year-old boy, that image of Jesus just did not resonate with me. I wanted battles, and I wanted dragons, and I wanted these great heroes. In fact, one day I was drawing like a dragon on the textbook, and my teacher came over and quickly told me that that was totally inappropriate and gave me a new textbook. That image of this tame Jesus stuck with me through high school, and Jesus always just seemed boring, somebody that I wouldn't want to follow. Until one day at a youth group night, the youth minister stood up and proclaimed that scripture reading. You've heard it before, the scripture reading about Peter walking on water. And I heard it for the first time. I'd heard it so many times, but I heard it with fresh ears for the first time. We know this story. There's a storm at sea, and all the disciples are in this boat, and they see Jesus walking on water, and they get scared because they think that he's a ghost. And Peter calls out to Jesus, and he says, "Lord, if that's you, call me out onto the water." And this is crazy. I mean, think about it. Jesus has calmed storms before. He's done it with the disciples when a storm came up at sea, and Jesus just said, "Hey, be still," and the sea calms down. So why does Peter look at Jesus and say, "Call me out onto the water if that's you"? And in listening to that, the youth minister said that's what a disciple is. Someone who steps out of what is comfortable into this great adventure. I was floored. And I went back to sacred scripture and I looked at all of the other things the disciples did, and it was so different than the image I had in my head of this happy band of followers of Jesus that were always smiling and following him wherever he went. These are people who saw demons cast out. These are people who walked on water. Peter walked on water for at least several hundred feet before he got to Jesus and started to sink. And even then, Jesus was right there in his moment of trouble to pull him out of the water. These are people who went out into the early church and proclaimed a message that was so provocative, so life-changing, that the church just exploded and grew exponentially. A disciple is a person who leads a full life of adventure. Not a person who's like partway, not a person who's halfway, but a person who's full. Jesus calls the disciples as they are. He calls them as fishers of men. Their original profession was just as fishermen. And he makes it this full, wonderful thing. Jesus is calling you to this life of discipleship. And to be a disciple isn't to be boring. It's not to be something different than who you are, but to be who you are to the best of your ability, to the best that God made you to be. A life free from sin and a life full of Christ. So as you consider what does it mean to be a disciple, I would challenge you with this. What boat do you need to get out of to walk on water? Is that boat more exciting, even though it might be more comfortable, than stepping out onto that sea and heading towards Jesus, doing things you never thought you'd do, seeing things you never thought you'd see, with a Jesus who is anything but ordinary and anything but boring?